Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney in London in the UploadVR studios as we talk about the next steps in personal computing. I'm going to start that over just because I saw the light come on so late. Hello, everyone,
You
and
were live.
thanks.
It's okay. You were live
All
from the
right.
start.
All right. Well, we're wearing Quest 3 headsets. I saw that question come up in our comments, and I wonder if David would actually want to respond or explain the answer to that question out there in the comments. But we're using Quest 3 headsets today with last generation Meta avatars. We've got hand tracking with built-in microphones, and we've got tablets in front of us that show us notes and comments so we can interact with our audience when we're live. Thank you to our patrons for supporting the work we do over on UploadVR.com. In case this is your first time, you can become a paying member at uploadvr.com to support the work we do directly. We thank our patrons by name here on this podcast and listed on the website. That includes XR Developer News, Podum, Holonet, Mike Manzano, Justin Corcoran at Phosphor Studios, and that was Smash Drums with Podum. And as well as Richard Meller, Parma John, Cubits, Steve Lucas, David Wyatt, Tiponch, and Soul Presence. Our patrons include people who understand just how wide and deep virtual reality is, and we thank you for spending your time with us exploring it. David, what do we have today?
Yeah, so I will start by answering that question from our viewer Jukebox Grim, who asks, are we still using Quest Pro because our avatars seem to have facial expressions of some sort? Our eyes move and blink and our mouths are synced. No, we're not. We're using Quest 3 and Quest 3S. Ian's on Quest 3 and I'm on Quest 3S. And we're using the old Oculus lip sync technology that takes in microphone input and uses a very basic neural network to figure out what is the most likely mouth movement to correspond to the audio input. So that's completely simulated. And the avatar eyes are similarly simulated. I, as the developer, mark different virtual objects in the scene with different levels of visual saliency, and an algorithm figures out a natural way to move the eyes. So even without face or eye tracking, you can get fairly somewhat convincing mouth movements and eye movements, but it's not the same thing at all as having real face tracking. You know, whether you're expressing an emotion of shock or truly making eye contact with someone, looking away, smiling, frowning, laughing, these things are not captured at this time. And, you know, we hope to see those sort of technologies come back to Meta headsets in future. We also hope that Apple makes them available as an SDK to developers. You know, I always kind of muse that if we were to port this studio to Vision Pro, none of that would actually change, because as a developer, you can't access Vision Pro's face and eye tracking at all. So there's some very interesting kind of dynamics there, and we'll have to see how that works with the dynamic of Android XR coming in as well. What's Google going to allow? What will they not allow? We'll have to see. Great to see everyone in the comments, by the way. So many familiar names. We could spend a lot of time reading them out, but I see a lot of regulars. It's great to see everyone pouring in now.
I love the locations. We've got Poland, where was it? New York City, Tennessee, and I saw someone having a barbecue in Sweden. So we love seeing where everyone is tuning in from, and people are catching up to us over time. Yeah, what is the list of subjects again, now that we've got that question answered?
Sure. So we have 7 topics today. We're going to start with 2 Meta AI glasses topics, or should I say Meta smart glasses. Firstly, Meta AI on the smart glasses can now access your calendar, your Google Calendar or your Outlook calendar. Then we'll talk about Meta Connect's agenda, essentially confirming a smart glasses SDK. That was the #1 question I've received from developers in our industry this year. When do I think Meta is going to release a smart glasses SDK? So I now have an answer to that. And then we will talk about an app called Wist, which Ian tried. So you capture using an iPhone, and then you get these kind of stabilized volumetric memory replays on Apple Vision Pro or Quest. And as we pointed out in the article, and we included a clip from this movie, it is very strikingly similar to the memory replay scene in Minority Report. If you don't know what we're talking about, go and click the article at the top of it. You'll see the clip from Minority Report. If you have seen Minority Report and you remember what we're talking about, it's very similar to that. Then we'll talk a little bit about SteamVR and Windows mixed reality. So firstly, We'll talk about the Quest 3 and 3S usage surge on SteamVR in August. And we'll discuss, was this a data error or is this due to the Quest 3S sales and Xbox edition? What's going on with that data? We haven't really brought up the Steam hardware survey data in a while, so it'll be interesting to dig into that. Then we will discuss Windows MR headsets getting revived by the free Oasis SteamVR driver. And this is just about a year after Microsoft removed support for Windows MR from Windows 11. So if you had an updated Windows 11 and you had one of these headsets, it was a paperweight. Now a lone Microsoft employee has released a free SteamVR driver that brings it back to life. And then just days after that, you'll see an article on UploadVR.com describing how Valve has now updated SteamVR beta to automatically install this driver if you're trying to use a Windows MR headset on SteamVR with Windows 11 2H24 or above. So even if you didn't know about this, because remember, most people don't follow the VR news, you can, if you have the SteamVR beta or whenever it rolls out to stable, just plug your Windows MR headset in and SteamVR will install that for you. Amazing stuff to see these headsets go from paperweights to back to life. And we'll discuss this all when the topic comes up. Finally, we will be discussing Steam Link and Steam Frame. Firstly, we just want to briefly touch on the fact that it seems very clear that Steam Link is about to come to Pico headsets. That's something we just want to briefly bring up, and then we will get into our main kind of Valve topic at the end there, Steam Frame. Valve has registered for the trademark for Steam Frame, and there are strong indications that this may be the name of its next headset. The code name was Deckard. It was never supposed to be called the Valve Deckard as a product. That was always the code name. Steam Frame may be the actual product name, and this trademark may indicate that Valve is getting very close to actually announcing. So a lot of exciting discussion there at the end.
Yep, very excited about a lot of these subjects today, and I'm just looking over the comments here. Thank you to Christoph for becoming a member at the start of this show before we got in here. So thank you over on the YouTube channel, and then of course you can get us on podcast, and we've got our emails posted up on our website if you want to reach out to us. I loved Arlen saying out there that I think they're rewiring something out there while they're listening to us. Some people are watching us on a barbecue. Some people are going to sleep while they listen to us over time. I love just hearing all the places people are watching us from. Some people watching us in VR. We love that too. But I'm excited to get to, I don't know, 5 of these subjects, and a couple of them I feel like we could probably move through pretty quickly. But we'll see. Let's get into it. The Meta AI subject first.
Sure, yeah, this is just one we want to briefly touch on. The Meta AI on the Ray-Ban Meta glasses and the Oakley Meta glasses, and presumably the HUD glasses, can now access your Google Calendar or your Outlook calendar if you give it permission. And so this really increases the usefulness of this, for me at least. I've been wanting this since launch. And this is not the kind of old Alexa style calendar access where you have to kind of very robotically say exactly what you're talking about, almost like you're doing some sort of, spoken SQL query. This is, quite natural. So, you can say things like, what time's my meeting tomorrow? When is my doctor's appointment? What's the address for that party tonight? You can summarize days or multiple days. You can say, what does my day look like tomorrow? You can say, what's my schedule this weekend? You could be like, what's my next month like? And you can even add events, right? You can say, add a coffee break tomorrow at 10 a.m. You can say, create a calendar event to go for a walk for 40 minutes tomorrow at 2 p.m. I think this kind of thing is definitely the kind of utility this needs. The only remaining core features I would want from this to make it like a genuinely useful all-day assistant that you don't have to take out your phone or any traditional device to use is email and navigation. So it was always for me calendar, email, and maps. Here's calendar, email is presumably going to come at some point, and then maps. And in case people are wondering, like, why would Google and Microsoft let Meta do this on their product? Uh, as far as I can tell here, Meta's just using the same API that any developer can use to access Google Calendar. And one of the many reasons that Google's services are popular and used is because they have an API. And if Google were to start blocking competitors, that would probably be the easiest antitrust case that the US government would ever get, right? So Google has no interest in blocking these use cases. For them, this is more people locked into Google Calendar, right? This is a good thing for Google and Meta in that perspective.
Yeah, you mentioned mail in that lineup, and mail is a little trickier. It's a little bit harder. Like there's more complications, I think, with mail, getting those sort of into your systems. Even on Vision Pro right now, there's no native Gmail app that I can really install. I have to go to the web browser version of Gmail to access that, even though the iPad version is available. I assume there's an iPad version available for Google to use in place of it. Yeah, I think we can move on to the second subject, unless there's something else here.
Yeah. Someone was bringing up here, Caleb was bringing up that I'm talking about Alexa being the last old generation of voice assistants, and they're validly bringing up that there is now Alexa Plus, which is kind of, bringing Alexa to the LLM world. I think it's so interesting that all these voice assistants, Siri and Alexa and Google Assistant, and Microsoft's Cortana back in the day kind of launched last decade before we had LLMs, and they were okay products. You could use them to set a timer and things like that, or turn your lights or TV off. But as soon as you started to get into these kind of complex use cases, they started falling apart. So now we're in the era where voice assistants can kind of be useful. But as you say, there's not much we want to say about this. Yeah, I don't think there's anything crazy we need to say about this. I think we can definitely move on to our next topic there, which is Meta Connect 2025's agenda. So they have it published online. I see some people pointing out that the time is very different of the keynote. It's usually 9 a.m. Pacific time or 10 a.m. Pacific time, and now it's 5 p.m. Pacific time. So that's certainly an interesting time difference. Some speculation I saw, which is very fascinating, was that the lighting in terms of from like the sun would be more suitable for journalists and media and other people to see the waveguide images coming from the HUD glasses. So instead of having like the morning light shining into it, they would kind of have a more dim evening light. I'm not familiar enough with California to know how the sun looks at different times to say whether that's true or not, but it's an interesting speculation for sure.
It's an odd one, yeah. I mean, I guess it's what is it called? Golden hour for California sort of lighting. At sunset, you get your cameras out. It was all over the movie Nope. It was a joke, and the movie Nope was getting your shot at golden hour, and this lighting is so nice at that hour. It's weird that it would be like seeing the images. I don't understand. Maybe it's less bright at that hour. I don't know. It doesn't follow. I don't know. It seems like a stretch.
It does seem like a stretch. It's possible, right? It's going to be one of the struggles for a while with all of these HUD glasses and AR glasses, is that they have to fight against the sun. And eventually you're going to get these ultra bright micro LED displays that can do that. But for the first while, we're going to be, with these LCOS displays, which LCOS gets a bad rap. It's not terrible. It's pretty good. And it's going to be used for quite a while because micro LED is so expensive and low yield. But that's beside the point. The point of this topic is that one of the things on this agenda, well, three of the things on this agenda seem to very strongly indicate that we're going to get some kind of SDK for smart glasses. So why do I think that? Three of the developer sessions set to take place on day 2 of Connect, so that's September 18th, include in the title, New Developer Toolkit for Meta to be announced September 18th in their titles, right? So the first of these 3 sessions is listed as being hosted by a Meta product manager whose LinkedIn bio is, I help companies bring their apps to AI-powered smart glasses like Ray-Ban Meta. So there's speech number 1. Number 2 is hosted by another Meta employee whose LinkedIn reveals that they worked on Meta's now defunct Spark AR development platform. So that was a development platform to build Instagram AR filters, but it's been defunct. So they are in the area of developer tools for AR. Okay, that one you may think is a little weaker. Number 3, is from another Meta employee, obviously, whose LinkedIn says that he manages software integrations with external parties for Ray-Ban Meta and Oakley Meta glasses, as well as the development of AR and AI content by external partners for Meta's future wearable devices. So all three of these talks have the title New Developer Toolkit for Meta to be announced. And all three of them are hosted by people whose LinkedIn profile suggests that they work with third-party developers for smart glasses. So our conclusion here, based on looking at this, is that it seems highly, highly likely that we will see some kind of SDK for smart glasses. Now, there are many forms that some kind of SDK could take. This is, as I said at the start of the show, something that a lot of people have been asking me about. When can I, as a developer, kind of target all of these people who are buying Ray-Ban glasses? When can I build things that, are able to use the camera and voice to add some interesting use cases? Whether it will be that, we don't know. Will it be an SDK platform for Meta AI? So it's nothing running on the glasses, because remember, Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth has said on multiple occasions that the glasses have an incredibly small amount of compute power. We're talking about something closer to a Fitbit than a smartphone. So all of the real heavy lifting happens on Meta servers. It's possible that this SDK will be for server-side apps. So you say, hey, Meta, tell so-and-so app or service to do this. Very similar to Alexa skills. We're talking about Alexa. Anyone who's got an Alexa, if you played around with it, you'll know there are these things called skills, server-side apps. It's possible that that's one aspect of this. Another possibility is that the HUD glasses that we have talked about many times, Meta planning to launch at Connect, the smart glasses with a small heads-up display in the right eye, will have more onboard compute power than the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, and be able to actually run very, very simple apps on board. And then you as a developer might be able to build for that. The reality is we don't know what it's going to be. We're going to keep a very close eye on Connect. We're going to bring you the answer. But I think, as I keep saying, there's so many developers that are looking here at how do I, as a developer, kind of ride this smart glasses wave? And it looks like we could be about to find out the answer very soon.
So Jukebox saying, who wants these glasses? I just don't get it. Steve saying the SDK might be like the first Apple Watch SDK where your program really ran on the phone. I think it's a good analogy. And then where was another one? I really liked the comment here from Adrian, who is watching us live for the first time. So just thank you for tuning in, Adrian. They typically watch us on 1.7x speed, time traveling, but they're watching us on normal speed right now. So I'm sorry I'm not talking fast enough for how you've trained your brain, but also this is how the rest of us live. So please welcome to our time. Thank you.
So yeah, on the comment of who wants these glasses, as we've kind of been reporting on, because we obviously listen to every Meta earnings call. We listen to every EssilorLuxottica earnings call. We listen in on most Apple earnings calls to figure out what are these companies telling their investors, what are the kind of stats here, how are these products selling. According to both Meta and EssilorLuxottica, lots of people is the answer to who wants them. They are selling them as fast as they can make them. Their primary constraint right now is production. The EssilorLuxottica is investing a lot of money to scale up the production to 10 million units per year by the end of next year. And Meta, told investors last quarter that while their Quest headset sales are declining, their Ray-Ban Meta sales are skyrocketing. And so they have this very small increase in year-over-year revenue for their Reality Labs division that does their wearables and metaverse. And that was kind of in spite of lowering Quest sales. So, totally get that some people don't want them. Of course, not every product for everyone. We're still in the early days of this, but looking at this, it's quite clear that a lot of people is the answer to kind of to who wants them. And that's why developers are wondering, or some developers, at least the ones in my inbox, are wondering, how do I kind of develop for this? I think Steve Barr's suggestion of maybe the SDK is like the first Apple Watch, where it's not really running on the glasses. It's either running on a server or on your phone. Fascinating idea. There's so many ways they could go about this. And I think another reason this is going to be interesting is because it's going to be the core foundation of where they eventually get to their SDK for their true AR glasses down the line, right? We talk often about how, if Meta had the benefit of hindsight for VR, they maybe would have designed their OS and SDKs and structures very differently. And now they're going to be in this same position where there's a lot of weight on how do they open up this developer platform that may be the kind of basis of their success for decades to come if things work out for them. It's going to be a lot of eyes on Meta here.
Yep.
Lil Spoogie, sorry, just one last question. Lil Spoogie asking, can we choose the eye we want the monocular display in? It's a very good question and something I've been wondering myself. All of the reports so far indicate it is in the right eye. In theory, it would probably be possible to do it for both eyes, but not as easy as it sounds. That would essentially be two very different SKUs from a like a kind of electromechanical engineering perspective. Because remember, only one side, at least on the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, has an actual camera. So you would have to jig around that maybe. I would be surprised if they have two SKUs. I think it's probably just going to be in the right eye.
It's you also, what was the rumor on a limited quantity of these things being made? So if you imagine it being almost a surface to test the wristband and how it can navigate basic menus, like this feels like a dev kit type product for a lot of what David just said, but built very much to test the surface of this wristband. So I think an early comment somewhere in this show asked, do you think you can get the wristband on its own? And we don't know. And that is going to be one of the very first questions out of David's mouth when he goes and speaks to the people at Meta directly.
Yeah, I think you're right to point out that this is going to be a limited quantity product. And yeah, very much so both a developer kit for developers to figure out. We can see that there is some sort of SDK coming here, as well as an experiment for Meta in saying both how does it sell? They have low expectations, but within that range, they need to see how it sells, as well as how do people use it? How well does this work in the real world? It is very much so going to be like this experimental first gen enthusiast product. This is not Meta's next big hit by any means. Oh, I mean, theoretically, I guess we could be wrong. Theoretically, this could start flying off the shelves, but we doubt it.
Well, and just to speak more directly to the question out there, I'm thinking I'm more left eye dominant. I'm thinking as my vision ages, my left eye is one I'm favoring more, and so the right eye being the place where this display is going to be a non-starter for me. And in fact, if you imagine a bunch of people out there that have this sort of latent condition that just one eye is better than the other, go and get these things and go, it didn't look good to me. In addition to us just not being entertained by the monocular display to begin with. But again, we have to go hands-on and really assess that over any length of time to get a good sense of how that feels. I'm ready to excited to talk about this next subject, though. It's a fun one.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how, when it comes to being kind of left eye, right eye dominant, how having a prescription lens on the waveguide works. That's going to be interesting. I don't use glasses myself, so it's not something I've personally tried. But I'm going to have to find out how to answer that question. Obviously, we do have people on staff that do use glasses, and hopefully we can answer that question for you as soon as possible in terms of how well does it work if you're left eye dominant, but you do have your prescription in front of the waveguide. Very interesting to see there. Yeah, I think we can move on to the next topic. I see Not Suspicious there saying that, the developer saying that they wouldn't be interested in an SDK until they could actually build, volumetric AR level apps. And just want to be crystal clear. We do say this a lot, but just in case there's any new viewers, this is not I know Not Suspicious knows this. I'm just clarifying for any of our newer viewers. This is not the Orion AR glasses. We're not talking about augmented reality with, 6 degree of freedom, positionally tracked virtual objects. We're talking about, a little floating heads-up display that you see when you look down in your right eye, more like having a smartwatch on your face, kind of, but with a bigger display than a smartwatch. But you can think of it as like directionally similar to that. But yes, let's move on to our next topic, because this is a really interesting one, and I'm really glad Ian got to try this. It's iPhone exclusive, and I use a Google Pixel phone, as I always mention, so I'm not able to try this, and I really wish I could. And as soon as it is available on Android, I will be trying it. But tell us all about this, Ian, because it does seem to be that Minority Report memory replay scene which again, if you haven't seen Minority Report or you don't know what we're talking about, go to the article right now on uploadvr.com. It's right at the top of the article. Tom Cruise using this volumetric memory replay thing in Steven Spielberg's 2002 film, but this brings it to life. Tell us,
Yeah.
Ian.
It's really fantastic, and it's really mind melting the way it meets us in the middle with science fiction. Right, this was promised to us a generation ago, and we got spatial videos out of I don't think it was starting with iPhone 15 or so, and then you got, or maybe it was iPhone 16, but you're shooting spatial videos with iPhone 16. It's a nice format. It's not as good as this. This is as close to reliving a memory as I've been able to see. And it instantly connects to the ultimate promise of this technology that you go back 30 or 40 years to see invented in science fiction. So, Wesley Crusher going and seeing his dad on the holodeck. This is darn close, right? Like, you could stand in front of this capture system and record a memory, just, put it on a disc, very similar to that scene in Star Trek: The Next Generation. The I did multiple tests here. David asked me multiple times to get into this app, and it took a few steps, but the steps weren't actually big, right? You just got to get the test app on your iPhone, the test app on the Vision Pro, and it's actually pretty remarkable to take a capture with the phone and then go to the headset, and the capture that you took with the phone is already sitting there inside the headset ready to be pulled up pretty instantaneously like that. That's not instantaneous, that's a few minutes, but it felt instantaneous because of how quickly it happened. And then it updates over time. They improve the models, and they're trying to improve the quality of this over time. They say that they keep all the data. Go read the article, because I walked through that you should go pay attention to the privacy policy with these types of services, because they're capturing more than just the image data. They're capturing the location of the phone, and they're keeping it all in the servers to try to create a picture that can fill in the gaps of all this data. And David and I were talking about this, and I even reached out to the developers here with my dream scenario, where they kind of outlined that they think if you were wearing a pair of glasses to capture one perspective, and then if you used your phone to capture another perspective, and the key here is you don't have to look at the phone to capture with this type of format. You're capturing a volumetric scene, so all it matters is that your phone is kind of pointed at the subjects in your scene in a pretty stabilized manner in order to get a usable output. So the creators of this are suggesting that if you have a slightly different perspective to fill in some of those capture details from this offset phone capture, you might get enough to fill in a lot of the gaps that you're seeing with my current capture setup. So people went and looked at the website. You can go comment on it, pointing out that there's little gaps in some of the mesh data and creating little circles. That's the areas that they want to improve over time. And yeah, they're they're a little distracting, but I cannot really convey, unless you go into a headset and experience these, how much better they are than photos and videos, right? I've spent a lot of years becoming a photographer and a videographer who can reasonably capture things with the rule of thirds and all that, and I'm stabilizing my shots ever so carefully, and this just erases a lot of that type of framing.
I think you're right in saying that this is one of those ones that seems to be really difficult to describe unless you're seeing it in the headset. And, how it looks, if we show you a clip in an article, is not the same as when you're seeing it in 3D. Steve Barr asks, are these captured only displayed in the same location that they were taken? No. So Ian, in the instances in the article where he's doing that, is manually lining them up. And that's a very cool feature. At some point in the future, Wist hopes to be able to do that automatically. They would probably need access to Vision Pro's cameras for that. That's something that Apple doesn't give developers access to yet, but that's something that could happen in future. I think what's really fascinating to me about this is how they keep the raw capture data. So that's not just the video they capture, but also depth that they're using on their servers. And then over time, as their models improve, as AI improves in general, this hologram representation gets better and better. So the raw capture stays there. And then every so often, say every 6 months or something, it's just a random example, you would get a notification, our model has improved. Go back and view your memories, and they're even better quality than before. They can use AI to fill in more and more of the gaps. And I think that's fascinating to me. And of course, there are privacy concerns there. You may want to not do that, but I think the benefit you get from that is just kind of really fascinating there. And yeah, this is. I see a couple of comments here, Mission, saying normal people will respond to things like this. I absolutely agree. Some people have this very myopic idea that the only thing that AR and VR is good for is gaming. Any other use case, let's not talk about it. It's not worth talking about. And I think on this show, our viewers obviously understand that that's not the case at all. There are so many of these potential other use cases, and it's a great example. Being able to take 3D photos and videos is a good start, of course, using your phone or whatever and taking a 3D video and being able to view it in your headset. But Wist is an example of how this can go much, much further. You can start to get, even with today's technology, without exotic, 12 camera setups and super computer GPU farms, we can start to get personal volumetric memories. And this is still in private beta. As Ian pointed out, he had to sign up to the iPhone test app and sign up to the Vision Pro test app. But I'm sure at some point they will be able to just launch this as a product. They're probably figuring out things like how do you scale the GPU processing? How do we do this from a business perspective? Are we going to charge a subscription or memory? They will be. They're clearly at the exploratory stage right now, getting the tech ready, and they'll be able to figure out all those other things over time.
Yeah, so I think we probably won't harp on this area too long, but I do want to go back to the science fiction depiction of this and talk about it, because you go look at that scene from Minority Report where Tom Cruise is basically vaping in the future and then sitting back and looking at his memories of a family he no longer has, basically. And the way it's depicted is with projectors kicking out 3D data from an otherwise like still image into his room and projecting it and like responding to his leaning and moving around to sort of relive this memory a little bit. And this is Steven Spielberg we're talking about here, with at the top of his game, producing with one of the best action stars in the world, a vision of the future that is startling, right? It was startling then. It's even startling now to imagine retina scans as you walk around, and the advertisements being personally tailored to mention your name as you walk by them. Those sorts of things in this movie. But it's so important that I spell out that this depiction of 3D media in the future, as shown by Minority Report, imagined it with no glasses on our faces. It imagined it with nothing. Because ultimately, you can imagine like someone looking at all this going, who wants to wear this crap on their face? And so I got to bring that up.
Yeah, so it is it's interesting how prescient it was in some senses. As soon as I finished work that day after we published this, I went and watched Minority Report again, because I just thought, wow, this is 2002 and this is showing. I think it's really interesting how well it shows the occluded areas behind the hologram not really working. It kind of had this inherent understanding that there would be these perspective-based occlusion limitations to volumetric media. But obviously, in an ideal world, to get to your point, you wouldn't need a headset or glasses for this. But one of the things that is very much so not on the horizon, and I've been to all of these trade shows where people are showing all of the most advanced cutting edge display technology prototypes. One of the things that is not on the horizon is volumetric glasses or headset free images. And I'm not sure you get these little kind of looking glass displays that you can look into. It's kind of a cabinet and you get a 3D-ish image. I'm talking about in free space at human scale, because one of the things that makes memories like this compelling is not just that it's 3D, it's that it's at true scale. It's the same thing when it comes to avatars and codec avatars that we talk about sometimes. The 3D and kind of embodied same coordinate space aspect is important, but it's also the one-to-one scale. We don't think that tiny miniature humans are humans, but when you get to proper scale and then you also have 3D, that's when the brain starts to click in. So, that's one of the things that I think it makes this compelling. And at the end of the day, people will put up with wearing something on their face if it gives them enough value to do so. If there's not enough value, they won't. But, to go skiing, people put on ski masks. To go diving, people put on diving helmets. There are all kinds of situations where if people find something valuable enough, they will don something onto their kind of body.
Well, I mean, to talk about valuable enough, and I'm seeing people in the comments sort of responding to this and realizing that, yes, there is an untapped market here for this content captured this way. 3D media, it's so weird to have kind of a 3D media renaissance of some sort on Apple Vision Pro because of their attention to the displays, giving us OLED, giving us this great immersive minimum viable content over on Apple Immersive that stretches out and has all the things done right to it. But then we all looked at it and go, you still can't lean around in it. It still is missing those micro movements that you do. That is just human movement, right? Human depth. Oh, like it's the most human thing is I want to look at this closer, right? And you can't do that with so much other media, and you can do it with this media. And so it's almost like this is, wrap this up and sell it to me in like, I need this in every way, shape, and form. I need it to be higher quality. I would rather not give away my data to a server farm. I would rather do this myself. But I mean, this is fantastic. And I saw Arlen already went to the eventual thing is, when can I set up 2 cameras and get a picnic? And David, and you and I were discussing this in the editing of this article of just what's the ideal setup here. Spontaneity is so critical to the capture of these moments.
Yeah. So, our discussion indeed was that I argued that the spontaneity of being able to take out a phone or just click something on your glasses and capture a moment, for me, is going to always win out over having to position multiple cameras, be that a phone and glasses or multiple people. I'm sure different services will cater for that, but I think we'll be surprised by how quickly these kind of 3D reconstruction neural networks improve over time, and that we'll not really need that. And I see some people kind of worrying about AI hallucinations, but we're not talking about like creating an entire scene out of this. We're talking about just filling in the gaps, and maybe you will be able to choose as a user how much do you want to fill in versus not. Maybe you can toggle at any time, only show me what was truly captured. But I think the line between that is going to be a little bit blurry, and it already is with computational photography. And we don't want to get into this debate too much, but the thing that the layman thinks of as being a photograph that they've taken from their iPhone, more of that image is synthetic than you may want to accept, right? A lot of it already is reconstruction in a very basic sense of the term. So I don't know. I don't think there's this one line between it's either completely real. None of the images that we have today on our mass market consumer devices are raw photon to pixel output at all.
Well, I love the random comment up above, like smoke. If you pumped a lot of smoke into the air, you could get that projection system from.
I've seen these. I've seen them before. You can kind of, we have them at airports now, right? I'm sure you've seen them yourself. They're 2D. They're not 3D. Doing that in 3D is not something that kind of makes sense. Like, there's no known technique that would truly do that. Even those kind of holograms you see that you leverage smoke, they're very much so 2D. It's another great example of like when you see something online in a video, it can look really cool, but 3D matters. Seeing something in real life shows how quickly a lot of these cool things you see online fall apart in person. I've seen these systems. They're not 3D.
So here's the Davin comment that is the classic one that is absolutely aggravating. And he's saying, I'm sad every time I take a photo zoomed in on the moon and my Samsung just drops the same NASA texture in its place. So on the iPhone 16 Pro, considered that's Apple trying to ship its best camera possible. And it's the one I'm using to do my captures of this. I click in to the menu system and there's like 1x, 2x, 3x, and 5x on the zoom options. And I know on the back, there's 3 physical cameras at least, and as well as additional sensors. And I click through this crazy menu system, and some options I can get 60 FPS, 120 FPS, 240 FPS for slow-mo. I can get 4K. I can get, everything is there in that menu system ready to do it. But what's really it's really upsetting is I go into this menu system, and if I click things just right, I can get like 60 frames per second at 5x zoom. But it's unclear to me, the user, whether that did the switch from optical to digital by clicking on that particular set of options. Apple's made it invisible to me, the user, knowing whether it's doing computational fill-in on of any level of what Davin is sort of talking about being the most extreme example. I'm saying no, I don't want any. I want the clean. Just don't do any fill-in, right? I want to try raw and see how that works.
All I'm saying to you is that at no point in the Apple camera is it raw. You can get apps that are able to capture at an earlier stage of the pipeline. It's still not completely raw. There's still some processing going on. But I'm saying even without going into super res zoom, like a lot of people are bringing up how when you go beyond the 5 or 10x of the optical telephoto camera, it starts to use some sort of on-device neural network to scale things up. I'm seeing people point out how the Pixel 10 now has a 100x zoom, like a lot of these cameras that's doing these on-device models. But yeah,
you know what it is? I put my finger on it. All right, when we take a photo or we take a video, we think mentally what we're doing is we're taking a unique moment, like we're trying to capture a unique moment in history. And all of this AI fill in the gaps is taking away or eating away at that feeling of I wanted to capture a unique moment. It's actually going to give you a unique moment just with a lot of little, the edges filled in for you, right? Like and it just feels different than the intent of trying to capture.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting philosophical debate. It's a fascinating philosophical debate. I think my only kind of contribution to it is that the line is more blurry between raw, real, and completely synthetic. It's really a spectrum along, and where you want to be is very different. You can go get a traditional non-smartphone camera and capture raw pixels, and that's still possible. But if you're using a smartphone at all, we're already in that world where a lot of it is doing kind of a little bit of magic. So should we go to the next topic, or is there anything else you want to bring up on that?
No, I think we covered it, and I think it's pretty reflective of our audience here and what they really wanted to talk about relative to this subject. Yeah, so I think we did a good job on that one. I'm ready to move on because this is some fun stuff coming up.
Yeah, so we're going to talk now about SteamVR, PC VR in general, and then obviously we'll get into that Windows MR topic. But we're going to start by talking about the Quest 3 and 3S usage surge on the Steam hardware survey. So if I bring this up here, you'll see that Quest 3, and I'm going to put quotes on that, went up by 6.99% in August. And this is one of the largest single-month relative usage share jumps we've ever seen. And so I'm sure that most people's initial question here will be, wait, Quest 3, not 3S? What's going on here? So something that's very important to understand about the Steam hardware survey is that if you're using Quest Link or Virtual Desktop to connect to your PC VR, your Quest 3S will show up as Quest 3. So what you see here is not the actual headset, it's what your headset presents as. If you're using Steam Link, it will present as Quest 3S. So what you see here listed as Quest 3S is only Quest 3S users that are connecting using Valve's official Steam Link. So what we can really say accurately, most accurately, I should say, is that the Quest 3 family, consisting of Quest 3 and 3S, now makes up just under 30% of usage on SteamVR. And that is very similar to Quest 2. So you can see here that, more than 60% of usage of SteamVR in August was either Quest 2 or Quest 3 or 3S. You can see here then the remainder, you see a small amount are using a Quest Pro or Original Quest, 7.3% using a Rift or Rift S, about 13.3% using a Valve Index, and the others are, relatively insignificant on the grand scheme of things. HTC at about 5%, Pico at 4%, Windows MR at 2.4%, and the others at 4%. So coming back to this surge in relative usage from Quest 3 and 3S, now that we know that that's what we're talking about here, the Quest 3 family, what might explain it? Firstly, it could just be some sort of error. It's not unusual for an error to show up in the Steam hardware survey where some really anomalous data shows up, but usually within about 24 to 48 hours, Valve fixes it. They correct it silently without an announcement. We keep an eye on this always. We always have one eye on this data at all times, so we know when it changes. And they have not done that yet, which is interesting to me because it suggests that it might not be a data error. It could also just be that no one at Valve has noticed, but it suggests it might not be. And I think if it isn't, there is a potential explanation. So in late June, Meta and Microsoft obviously launched the Quest 3S Xbox Edition, and within a couple of days, it had sold out. Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth described how they were surprised by the demand for this and that it had kind of outsold their expectations. That's his claim. We can't say whether he's being entirely honest about that, but that is his claim, and we should note it. Then also, in addition to this Xbox Edition, which seemed to sell out very quickly and exceed Meta's expectations, in July, on 2 occasions, Quest 3S, the regular edition, went on sale for $250, $50 off. One of those was Amazon Prime Day, which Walmart matched, and another was for 4 days later in the month. So it's possible that the combination of these Xbox Edition buyers and these people who picked up this at $250, and whatever you think about Fresnel lenses or Meta's decisions, $250 is insane value for a Quest 3S with track controllers and everything you get there. It's really, really good value. So it's possible that what happened there was that enough of these owners, buyers connected to SteamVR in August to see a significant jump in that usage. That is one possible explanation there.
And change. I don't know if you said this. I was looking at a lot of the comments when you were talking a little bit, but changing how they record some of these could have shifted them into different categories as well, right?
I think that's unlikely because what you see, this taking usage share out of is things like Quest 2 and Valve Index, primarily Valve Index here. A lot of this could also be right. This is summer. We're seeing people kind of, usually it's summer, VR usage goes down for the obvious reasons that it's kind of hot and sticky and you don't want to put a headset in your face. And then maybe it just happens to be that coinciding with this reduction in these kind of headsets like Index that do get quite warm, then you get people coming in with these Quest 3S sales and Xbox Edition and pushing it up. But yeah, I think we don't know. Anything at this point is speculation, and we're going to have to wait and see if Valve decides to update this data. I think the other number we want to look at here is not just the relative usage, because everything we've been talking about so far is relative, right? These all add up to 100%. This is just within the people who used SteamVR in August, how many used each headset. But the other interesting number, of course, is this overall Steam users with VR headsets. And that's something that we also watch very, very closely. And so we log this data every month since Valve switched to the new methodology. Before April 2020, they used to just scan your USB to see which headset you had connected. And then from April 2020 onwards, they changed it so that any headset you used on SteamVR in the last month would be counted. They just scan your SteamVR logs. And there's always some confusion here because people go, I did the hardware survey and my headset didn't show up in VR headset. And as utterly confusing as this sounds, that's actually not how they count this number. They actually count this number from just scanning SteamVR logs, and it goes up separately. Very confusing, but that is what Valve told us all the way back in April 2020. And so if you look at over time, you'll actually notice something quite despairing here. The number of Steam users using a VR headset has gone down. However, what has also happened in this time, these 5 years, is that the number of Chinese users on Steam has dramatically increased. So what we've also been doing, and we also went back retroactively and collected this data, is looking at what percent of Steam users are using the Chinese language. And from that, we can then filter them out or adjust for them, and then you see that the data looks slightly different. It is still stagnant, right? It's not actually increasing over time, but it's not decreasing anymore. And so, in case you're wondering, like, why are we filtering out Chinese users? There's two reasons for that. Firstly, a lot of the increase in Chinese Steam users is believed to be from internet cafes in China, like PC gaming cafes, where nobody's going to connect a headset there. It's not fair to count that. And also, in addition to that, they have a very different VR market where Quest and Index and etc. aren't officially sold, and things work quite differently. So it's a useful way to analyze this data to look at this, but it's still, we kind of talked about last week, PC gaming in general, PC VR. There has been no growth in PC VR relative to PC gaming since the release of Half-Life Alyx. And so I think it does very much so support the claims of some people that it's a content issue, that we aren't in this parallel world where Valve is releasing a yearly VR title or every 2 years. There's no other major publisher or platform holder that has any direct investment in the success of PC VR. And there are also going to be other factors there, right? You could argue that PC gamers just don't want VR at this point. They want to sit down and use their traditional monitor, right? There is this kind of interesting phenomenon amongst PC gaming where, despite the fact that you would assume that PC gamers are the most kind of pro new tech, new ideas, new things, they kind of do have this proclivity to, no, I just want the same thing but better. I just want more, teraflops, more resolution, nothing new. I don't want any different kind of gaming. I just want the same thing but scaled up. So there's a lot of different factors here, but I think it's just really interesting to note that this has happened. The stagnation that you see here, even when you adjust for the Chinese users, as standalone VR has massively increased in usage over this time. At the time where this data was recorded, the Quest 2 wasn't even out yet. And so it's interesting to see this, and it kind of opens the question, when might this change? And that is something that we will obviously be talking about at our final topic when we talk about the Steam Frame trademark by Valve, because it seems here that we're in a world where you can get a $300 headset that can wirelessly connect to SteamVR. That's not the issue. It's not price anymore. I don't think that's the case. We just said the Quest 3S was on sale for $250. Well, as we'll discuss very soon, you can pick up a Windows MR headset now for $50 if you grab it before people realize Oasis exists. It seems it's something else other than price is the problem.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to talk about the next subject here on this. But also there's the comments out there that we kind of derail us a little bit with some of these interesting ideas here. PC's becoming a console with Steam Deck and Windows handhelds. Deckard is going to turn PC VR into a console too. I think that's the vision. That's what could be. We'll discuss that later. PC VR is just too high a hill for normal people to climb. Too much friction. And then NI saying at least it's consistently between 2 to 3% besides that recent dip. I like Steve Bars. Hadn't thought about it. Perhaps PC VR headsets compete against curved monitors. Not just that, but triple monitor setups or double monitor setups are competition for a VR headset. And you can imagine you're a high-end gaming consumer, right? There's no hope of another Valve VR game to go out and buy. They haven't made any announcements. So you come to the market and go, what am I going to get for my next gen PC gaming setup? I want to set up the best, racing rig imaginable. And it's going to be a triple monitor racing rig with a nice motion share, and my whole family is going to enjoy it. I'm going to invite my friends over. They're going to race in the rig. Or you sit there and go, I'm the only one that's going to enjoy this. I don't need it to share it with anyone else. I'm going to get a big screen beyond, and I'm going to strap this right to my face, or I'm going to get, this is how the choice goes in your head. And yes, this is the competition. That's all competition for VR. And one at a time, these people have to be reached on actually VR being the better choice for them.
I think that's a great point. And I think to come back to my constant rant about field of view, Why is a triple monitor setup better than a single monitor setup? Because it triples your field of view. And VR actually doesn't offer better field of view horizontally, at least, than a triple monitor setup. It does vertically, but it doesn't horizontally, which is why I think VR should be pushing on its strengths. Why I think, coming back to my Boba 3 demo a few weeks ago, why that shows a direction that is better. You cannot get a triple monitor setup that gets you to 180 degrees of field of view and 120 horizontally. You can't get anywhere near that. You would get so close to the monitor, you wouldn't be able to focus on it with your eyes. You need optics at that point. So I actually think that's a great example of why VR should be pushing on field of view. But coming back to this, if you look at the Steam hardware survey, I don't have a chart for you on this one, but most people are using a single 1080p monitor on Steam. That sounds crazy and almost unbelievable when we talk about PC gaming and imagine surely everyone has a 4K monitor. Go look at the stats right now. Google Steam hardware survey if you don't believe me. Most people are using a 1080p single monitor. So this is an interesting thing. I think it comes back to my point before. A lot of PC gamers literally don't want anything else than just a more powerful GPU and CPU to play the same games over and over again on their 1080p monitor. And I'm not going to kind of say, oh, you're wrong. That's what they choose to do. That's their choice. But I think, it's a hard enough sell to get them to convince them that a 4K monitor is a good idea. I think you're going to need someone like Valve coming along and releasing great games again. I really agree with the commenters here that are saying it's a games problem. Half-Life Alyx is amazing and it got a bunch of people to buy a headset, but you can't release one game and then 5 years later think that you're going to coast along on that. That's not how this works.
I have a theory. You're gonna have to follow me on this for a second. What's the default? What do you think the default resolution is of Steam Link streaming?
It depends on your headset, and you can set it yourself. It depends. It's going to be like 2K.
I'm saying throwing a Steam flat screen from your PC in the corner to your other room or your device.
I think it's 1080p, but you can choose in the settings. You can choose to make it whatever you want. I'm pretty sure. It depends on the device.
But you said majority of users using Steam are 1080p. What's the percentage there? You say a majority are 1080p.
I can bring it up in the background. You talk and I'll bring it up.
All right, so let's go get that percentage. But what I'm suggesting is that number actually indicating the usage of Steam Link at large? Is that number indicating that Steam Link is actually being used in its 1080p default format for a heck of a lot of uses where people are throwing a screen around their room or around their house?
Okay, so I just checked. It's 55% are using a 1080p monitor specifically, and you can break it down to the other ones. But no, this is physically the physical monitor connected to the PC. This is a 1080p monitor. I think it's a really interesting stat because we so often have this idea of 4K monitors being really common. Like surely every PC gamer has their 5090. I always bring this up as well, the fact that all of Nvidia's marketing is on the 90, right? The 5090, what's the 6090 going to be? But that's actually not what the vast majority of people buy. They actually buy the 60 or the 70, not even the 80, right? There is this massive discrepancy between what we think people buy and what they actually buy. And that's interesting when it comes to VR because we have to kind of calibrate our expectations. People spend all their money on getting the best GPU and CPU and things like that, and then they kind of go, oh crap, I need to actually buy a monitor now. And let's see, when it comes to 4K, I'm looking at the stats. It's it's 5% of Steam users have a 4K monitor.
Yeah,
crazy.
So VR enthusiast saying, I was triple monitors and just switched to ultra wide. I still use VR for Sims, no contest. And I think that's a good way of that's an obvious way of approaching it, right? That makes a lot of sense for all things considered, right? But we're thinking about the people that have money for one device in the next year, right? And what are they going to decide? Because that is the market that Valve's going after, Meta's going after, everyone's going after in their own way. And what device are they going to get to add to the next 5 years of their life?
Yeah, I mean, I also sim racing's great. I love to do sim racing, but it's not. We're not talking about millions and millions of people. This is something like 3 million people. When we're talking about how do we get VR to 4%, 5%, 10%, it has to be more than sim racing and VR chat. This has to be something that people want to play regular games. I think one of the things that would do it is if Valve releases their next game, I think it's called Deadlock or something, and it supports VR as well. You need to see the company that owns SteamVR, that owns Steam, that's potentially, as we'll talk about, going to launch a headset. It needs to put its content investment where its ideas are and believe in it and show PC gamers that it believes in it. And they did that with Half-Life Alyx, and it was amazing. But that was 5 years ago, and we need something more than that.
So
Yeah.
before we move on, I want to talk a little bit about people talking about the frame rates and what's nice enough on frame rate. And we have to just bring up that when you're talking about frame rates in VR, you go up to 72, 90, 120, or even 144, go up those high super frame rates. You're talking about doubling, in some cases, going more, the amount of processing power you need to achieve those frame rates without any of the fill in the gap AI stuff that we just spent a previous segment of this show talking about. And what we get at is like, if you're one of these people that are a real stickler about being at 60 frames per second on flat, you're going to be probably a stickler about wanting 120 frames per second in VR without AI filling in any frame gaps. And the thing that this has a different effect on you, the person enjoying the media in VR, than if you were viewing it on a flat screen. It builds up in your system over time as discomfort. So maybe after 45 minutes of a reprojected experience, and that's all that's happened, is you've been looking at 45 real frames every second you've been in VR. And after 20 minutes of that, you're like, can I come back to you? Like, can I get back in here in like 15 minutes? This isn't feeling too good. I got a little bit of a headache. Is that how it feels? Am I describing that right? Please let me know if I'm right in the audience there on what that's like.
Yeah, I think one of the huge challenges to PC VR in general is just how difficult it can be to drive these high-end experiences, because especially if the game is a hybrid game that is designed to run at 1080p 60 FPS on your card, and then you're trying to run it at more than 2K per eye, 3K per eye at 90, and obviously there are other overheads. You're doing 3D, you've got usually a slightly wider field of view. As I always point out, there are techniques that are used in flat screen gaming that trade off latency for throughput. So you get higher frame rate, but higher latency as well. And you have to throw away those techniques in VR. It's just it's a tougher challenge at all. Do we want to move on to the next topic? Is there anything else you want to say about this?
I think we're good. And the next one is a really, really fun one, a big one to me. It's almost like, it's Resurrection Day.
Yeah, this is amazing. This is truly one of those good news stories that we love to report on. So around a year ago, Microsoft started rolling out Windows 11 24H2, the big major late 2024 update to Windows 11, and it removed support for Windows MR. So that meant Acer, Asus, Dell, HP, Lenovo, and Samsung PC VR headset owners who got that update on their PC could no longer use their headset at all. And I don't just mean in Windows MR Home, I mean at all. Because the way that Windows MR headsets were supported on Steam back then was through a shim. So the Windows MR had its own runtime, and then the SteamVR driver, it wasn't really a driver, it was just a shim from Windows MR to SteamVR. So once you get rid of the actual Windows MR driver from Windows 11, the headset's gone. So we had this situation where their computer updated and their headset became a brick. Crazy stuff. There were a lot of strong feelings at the time. We're not going to go into the depths of despair there, because the news is that this situation is over. A lone Microsoft employee, Matthew Bucchianeri, has released a SteamVR driver, a native SteamVR driver for Windows MR headsets called Oasis. So it does not require any other software, just SteamVR and Oasis. And then your headset comes back to life on Windows 11. It can be used again. In fact, it's better because you don't have to go through Microsoft's runtime and SteamVR's. It acts as if it was, a HTC Vive or something like that. It's a native SteamVR headset. So this person is someone who we've actually been reporting on
for a long time. He's kind of a pillar of the industry at this point. As I've pointed out when we bring him up before, he's a very experienced software developer. He worked on the PlayStation 4 at Sony and the original PlayStation VR. He worked on Falcon 9 and Dragon at SpaceX. He worked on HoloLens and Windows MR at Microsoft, and he currently works on Xbox at Microsoft. He also contributed to OpenXR when he worked at Microsoft. And in his spare time, he developed OpenXR Toolkit and VDXR, which is Virtual Desktop's OpenXR runtime. So he worked with Guy Godin there to bring Virtual Desktop's native OpenXR runtime that bypasses SteamVR. He was also an outspoken critic of Meta's previous OpenXR strategy. So he's someone we've been reporting on for a bunch of different reasons in VR. So he chose the name Oasis because that was actually the code name for Windows MR inside Microsoft back in the day. And he says that this driver is the result of deep reverse engineering alongside a combination of luck and perseverance. And so he says, while it's not breaching intellectual property laws, he will not be releasing the source code to avoid accidentally breaching any of his Microsoft NDAs and other obligations. So this Oasis driver includes full support for headset tracking, controller tracking, haptics, buttons, triggers, sticks, battery state. It includes basic monoscopic camera pass-through, right? Using the tracking cameras here for basic mono pass-through. For the Samsung Odyssey and HP Reverb headsets, it relays the IPD value. So you get IPD adjustment that they support. And even if you have the HP Reverb G2 Omnicept Edition, their enterprise version, it even supports the eye tracking. Crazy. The only headset feature, as far as I can tell here, that isn't supported is Bluetooth. So these headsets do have Bluetooth on board. This comes down to back to that big issue with PlayStation VR 2. So you will have to use your PC's Bluetooth. So that means a USB adapter, PCIe Bluetooth adapter, or if your motherboard has it. So worst case scenario here, if you want to get your controllers working with this, you have to go and get a $10 Bluetooth adapter on Amazon. Not the end of the world. And I think this is just incredible how well this works, that this can just, this is distributed on Steam, and it brings your headset back to life. I've spoken to many people now who have told me, holy S word, this works. We're trying not to swear this week, but it works. It literally brought my paperweight headset back to life for free from an app I downloaded on Steam. And so the other news here, this was a couple of days ago, that the other news that we've just published in the past 24 hours or so is that the latest version of SteamVR, Valve has updated it to automatically install the Oasis driver if you're using Windows 11, H224 or above. So even if you don't follow the VR news, which most VR buyers don't, even if you just got this secondhand or brought it out of a closet and hadn't heard about Microsoft removing support, you plug this in, and if you're running SteamVR beta, or when this gets to stable, you go to open SteamVR and it prompts you to install the driver instead of all the Microsoft one that doesn't work anymore because the thing isn't there. Amazing work. Amazing work.
I want to sing that song, I'm sailing away. It's got the vibe of just that just beating the system, right? So David wrote the headline on the automatically installs the Oasis driver, and you didn't take my suggested headline on, or you might have missed it, but I'm happy with my suggested headline on this one, where Steam is adopting bricked Windows mixed reality headsets that were revived by the Oasis driver. Like, that's
I don't think
what
I
it
saw
means
that.
to
I
me.
think so. Funny story. I was writing this last night. The Steam VR beta automatically updates, and I fell asleep. So I then woke up and then just started writing again and finished it. So I didn't see anything else. I just that's upload VR for you folks.
I love it. All right. Well, all right. So my headline
dusk.
then. So my headline was Steam adopts bricked mixed reality Windows mixed reality headsets revived by Oasis driver, and those verbs are real. Like, it really did. Like, Steam is taking hardware that was killed by its parent and bringing it under its umbrella. Like, I don't know any more way of that's what it is. That's what happened. And I'm not being poetic. That's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, this really is incredibly good news story. And as a lot of people pointed out, because these things were bricks, you can find like a Reverb G2 on eBay and Facebook Marketplace, or at least you could a few days ago, for $50 or $80, which is insane because we're talking about a headset that has, the 4 tracking cameras, 2K per eye LCDs, IPD adjustment, has a good ergonomic fit. As we described in our review, it's a great headset with bad controllers. So if you were someone who just wanted like a sim racing setup or a flight sim setup, like we've just been talking about, amazing. Even if you just want to play general VR, you'll take bad controllers for a $50 or $80 all-in price. Now, of course, now that Oasis is common knowledge, those aftermarket prices are likely very, very different. But maybe you can still find some people that don't realize this has happened. I feel like that's almost scamming them at that point. But they put the listing up. You're muted there.
You're going to find these things at thrift shops, right?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, and nobody there will know that the price difference is. So, I mean, you could get a headset for $50 that's got controllers there, and you might have to dust off the lenses.
Yeah. So there's one massive caveat we should bring up. I was just about to bring up, and we got a little bit distracted here. Oasis is only compatible with NVIDIA graphics cards. That is the big, massive caveat. So if you do have an AMD graphics card or an Intel graphics card, I don't think many people have the Intel ones, you're out of luck, unfortunately. Now, this is not Matthew deciding that he hates AMD. Unfortunately, AMD's does not allow EDID overrides, and their Liquid VR direct-to-display system has been deprecated for like 7 years. He has written to AMD. He has given them the exact details of what they would need to do. They have known for months what they need to do. And as far as I'm aware, they have not yet responded. So if you have an AMD card and you don't like that, this is, the downer of this news. We do have to bring this up. If you don't like that, contact AMD. They are a company. They will respond to customers if there are enough. Send an email to AMD and say, I am a customer. I bought your graphics card. I would really appreciate if you would respond to Matthew and get his Oasis driver working on AMD cards. His hands are tied unless AMD give him, a kind of exemption to this low-level access thing he needs. He can't do it. So he has, I just want to be clear, he has written to them. They have not responded. If they do, I am sure he would update this tomorrow and get it for AMD cards. So unfortunately, if you're at AMD, you're out of luck on this.
What I love about this is I see another commenter sort of in the same boat as me, right? I'm trying to whittle around and whittle down my old hardware and get, I don't want the big box of cords, right? I'm trying to actually use the things I keep around. And one of the things that I've kept, I might have another one in another box, is a couple of these old Windows MR headsets. And I have one sitting right there hanging on the wall, which it's basically just been to be able to point at and say that's what VR looked like from Windows back in 2017. It wasn't super great. It only had this number of cameras and had all these limitations, but I can point at it. It's right there. But here's the magic of today, this incredible work out there, this open source community. I have to just take a breath and give credit to the open source community that has grounded the VR market for a decade now. It's just beautiful work out there. So if you're an open source contributor, you're doing humanity's finest work.
Very much so agree. Just want to be clear that this particular driver is not open source. It's free, but it's not open source. And that is because, look, reading between the lines here, this is a Microsoft employee who worked on Windows MR that has magically been able to bring all the features back. It's clear that I'm not going to say anything more. I'm just saying there are obvious reasons why he's not going to make this open source. He has NDAs with Microsoft. I hope he keeps his job and is able to, do whatever he wants for a long time. So let's not, call him out here, but it's clear why this isn't open source. I just want to say thank you to Deepansh, who is in the comments, who just said that they just became a patron a few weeks back, and they're saying that they finally caught this live. Great to see you live on the show. And they say they really hope I can fly business class to the next SIGGRAPH. You really have brought this business class idea up. I want to be clear, that's not happening ever. I am okay with economy class. We're not going to waste your contributions on that.
I'm the one that's insisting on business class for David. Okay, he's not asking for it.
Even if we could afford it, I wouldn't do it. You're spending on more sensible things.
David, did you get sick on your last trip?
But that was food poisoning. That doesn't count. That was food poisoning.
I was right for the wrong reasons again. Darn it.
It might have been the airplane food, but I don't think it was the airplane food.
All right. Well, I appreciated the other. So James was saying he was talking about you falling asleep at your table, and what was the comment? It was David sleeps only when he is tired, and then works when awake. VR right, sleep, repeat. This is the perfect opportunity, like Deponch, to become a patron at UploadVR.com or a member and support our work directly, so that we can have a life outside of VR more often. I think is
what's
a
a life
request.
outside VR? I don't understand.
See, David knew where I was going with that. Yeah. All right. We're let's move on, David.
Yeah. So I think the last thing we just want to say on this, in a world of companies deprecating products and shutting things down and making it so you can't use things, this is a breath of fresh air. And a comment I saw under our article when we posted it on X was someone saying, rage against dying of the light. And I think this is, it's a great example. I can't say more and more that this is, just amazing. I see James Howe saying, isn't economy class with an Apple Vision Pro business class? I absolutely agree. As I always say, when I'm there in economy on my Vision Pro, I've got a better setup than anyone in first class.
David needs a Wally seat, okay, with leg room. All right, come on, people.
No. Okay. Let's talk about Valve again. We're talking about Steam Link now specifically. So the first Valve Steam topic here we have is that Steam Link is seemingly coming to Pico headsets. So an official ByteDance URL describes a beta for Steam Link on Pico 4 Ultra, Pico 4, and Pico Neo 3 Link. And ByteDance, in case you don't know, is the Chinese tech giant that owns TikTok and Pico. So in the same way that you can go onto the Quest store and grab Valve's official Steam Link and connect to SteamVR in a couple of seconds on your Quest, that capability seems like it is coming to Pico very soon. And as I've brought up on this podcast many times, you can technically already extract the APK off your Quest after you install it from the store and then sideload it onto your Pico, and this already works with a couple of quirks. There are references to Pico in SteamVR that have been discovered by Luna and by Brad Lynch. This has been a long time in the works, and for Valve, it just makes sense. Why, in the same way that they do it for Quest, why not? Why not let Pico owners connect to SteamVR in a couple of clicks? So this is great. As I always point out, I understand that Americans don't care because Pico headsets aren't sold in America. But if you are someone who's picked up a Pico 4, Pico 4 Ultra, or Pico Neo 3 Link even, this is just yet another option for you. And, Geek Odin's virtual desktop is there already, but especially for new users, people often want to just try this out with a free app before they jump into the $25 or $30 version. I can't remember what that virtual desktop is. It's either 25 or 30 now.
We were to talk about that last subject here. A lot of build up to it. It's been a very Valve week this week, and I love it when a plan comes together. Is how it feels to me when I hear all these things, lined up one after another. Any comments you want to talk about before we talk about that last subject?
Yeah, just James O'Loughlin's comment that we're seeing here Valve port the Steam Link VR version from Quest to Pico, but that's literally the same app. These are Android OpenXR headsets. But James O'Loughlin is asking, or hoping at least, that Valve makes a Vision OS version. So on Apple Vision Pro, you can already use the flat screen version of Steam Link as an iPad app, because Vision Pro, if you're not aware, can use many iPad apps from the store unless the developer has opted out. So Valve has not opted out. You can grab the Steam Link iPad app and play Steam flat screen. But what James O'Loughlin is wondering, and we're wondering too, is will we see a Steam Link VR version for Apple Vision Pro? And it didn't really make sense before Vision OS 26, which is set to introduce controllers, the PlayStation VR 2 Sense controller support. But once we do a Vision OS 26 out there in the world, which should be anytime in the coming weeks, then there's a lot more incentive for Valve to do this. And yes, it's a small market, and yes, this is going to be a subset of a subset. But I don't know. I could see Valve being the kind of company that would want to do that. And I think this will be one of the Vision OS 26 potential apps that we are most eagerly awaiting.
There's a good comment here that might be a good one to bring up for the opening of our last subject here. More competition is always better from Don out there, but there was someone else that said As an American, yeah, I'm an American, and I very much care about there being more or any additional competition against Meta. I think that's a very universal feeling amongst people out there waiting for other options.
Yeah, I mean, I'm being a bit dismissive. I'm also looking at our article analytics. So, when we report on Pico News, it gets a lot less attention than we report on any other platform, Quest or Apple Vision Pro or things like that. So I kind of always note that, and I can actually go down and see that it's because we get the same amount of traffic from non-American countries, but the traffic that we would get for Quest News from America for Pico News doesn't go there. So I'm actually it's a data-based observation, but I understand, of course, it's great that there is competition, even if it's not in your country. So one last question there. Jonas asking, but Mac doesn't have VR support, right? Yeah, no, we'd be talking about Vision Pro connecting to your Windows PC. So SteamVR is running on your Windows PC. Steam Link is running on your Vision Pro, and you would connect. However, Mac is actually getting VR support in the coming update. As we talked about before, the Mac remote rendering thing, where you can actually do, it's not the same supported, like we're not talking about VR games here, but you actually can render on a Mac and Vision Pro in the coming Mac OS 26 and Vision OS 26. Yeah, here's an image here showing the kind of architecture there.
Proton has brought up some Steam games inside of Mac, right?
Sure, but SteamVR dropped support for Mac years ago.
Yeah.
So you can play Windows games on Mac using things like Proton and other compatibility layers, but SteamVR itself does not run on Mac OS. Valve actually specifically dropped support for it 4 years ago or so.
So there's a what's the game? Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. Such a wonderful game, and it's almost generationally old now because of just how early it was in the I'm curious if people in our audience have never heard of that game before, even though it was absolutely so phenomenal when it first came out, as proving the ability of VR. You get a PDF of bomb defusal instructions, and you give that to your partner, and then inside VR you gotta open up this suitcase and look around at all sides and open it up. I pulled that up on Mac, and it actually renders on ultra wide in a really interesting way. And I would love to see that suitcase just automatically rendered into my headset. I'm manipulating that suitcase all of a sudden right in my headset and playing that game again. But
it's on Quest, right? There's no reason they couldn't port it to Vision Pro. I don't think you need a Mac there, but it's a great game. I agree with you. If anyone hasn't played it, certainly do. Yeah, it's a brilliant party game. You've one player in the headset, everyone else is out there with printed instructions or using a PDF or whatever. Yeah, brilliant game. Anyway, let's get on to our final topic. I think we're ready to talk about this. This is another thing I kind of woke up to multiple messages to you from you in regard to, and of course I understand why. This is a very, very exciting piece of news. Valve has trademarked Steam Frame, or they have registered for a trademark for Steam Frame, and SteamVR data miners have found references to Steam Frame in connection to VR. Multiple leakers that usually are relatively accurate about Valve have claimed that this is the name of their next headset. It looks like this could be the product name for Deckard. In case anyone didn't catch the intro of the show, Deckard is, of course, the code name of the headset, but it was never supposed to be the product name. And it looks like, in the same way that Valve, calls the handheld console the Steam Deck, could the headset be called the Steam Frame? And so before we get into this discussion, just a little bit of background. The idea that Valve is going to release a headset, or at least it is working on one, is not a rumor. Valve has repeatedly, over the past 4 years, confirmed that it is working on a new headset. It is specifically hinted that this headset will have a strong focus on wireless streaming from your PC. They have very strongly hinted at that on multiple occasions. Back in December, images of new VR controllers from Valve, codenamed Roy and Deckard, both of course being Blade Runner characters, were found in SteamVR, where you see this kind of touch controller-like design, but with D-pads and multiple index triggers. such that it could replicate all of the inputs of a standard gamepad. That suggests it will have a strong focus on flat screen 2D gaming. We obviously have heard multiple leaks and claims. There have been claims of a $1,200-ish price point. There have been claims of LCD displays, all kinds of claims. We don't know what Valve is actually going to ship, but my one contribution to starting this discussion here, and you can get into it yourself, Ian, is to me, Steam Frame strongly suggests what's been in our faces for months now, that this headset is going to have a very, very strong focus on 2D windows floating in space, just like Apple Vision Pro does.
Yeah, I like to think of it as, what is a Steam Frame, right? When you start, if you think about that name, it applies perfectly to this idea that they're just wrapping a window into space. It's like putting a wrapper around Windows for you, and that it speaks to the whole overall trend of Proton and building up the Steam OS to just let you have Windows without Windows. What is Windows without Windows? A frame? Like that's kind of the hinting at the language that they might be going at here. We obviously need to. I reached out to Valve to ask them if they'd comment, and that's up to them, right? They can leave us on red for months and then pop out of nowhere and say, "Come check this out." They could leave us out of that group if they really wanted to, and invite other people if they wanted. We'd love that invite. We'd love to see that headset when they're ready. We're waiting around for it basically for years now, and it's going to be a big moment when that hits. The thing that I guess I'm going to throw up about the Deckard idea, right? AR device, Deckard, the people were thinking the AR at the end maybe refers to augmented reality. I'm going to throw out the idea that might not be what this device does, right? This device might be solely focused on let's focus on being a frame for 2D content, and then also accessing PC VR content over on your linked PC, as well as a growing library, hopefully, of stuff that you can access on the headset itself. But I don't imagine necessarily them coming after augmented reality and mixed reality and this market that Apple has gone after really, really hard, with spatial computing being its pitch. For the very first thing you see in an Apple Vision Pro is you look down and you see your hands through this augmented reality pass-through camera vision.
West.
And it's the similar thing. I don't imagine it being the same type of device. I think that's too many. It's a lot of hardware and cost for something that isn't useful for VR games or for flat screen gaming.
I think it's a really interesting open question. For me, the biggest question about this headset that no leak has really answered or hinted at in any way is, will it be primarily focused on standalone, or will it be primarily focused on PC, or where along that spectrum will it be? You could imagine either of these approaches. You could imagine Valve coming out with something that is basically a Valve Quest, right? Something that is directly competing with Quest 3. The idea is you have this kind of separate version of Steam, or you have that ultra low mode on games, or however they want to pull it off. And the idea is you buy just the headset. It's wireless, it's standalone. Of course, it also connects to your PC via Steam Link, just like Quest does. No one would ever suggest that they wouldn't do that, but maybe the primary focus is on standalone. I actually think that's the less likely option now. For me, I think the most likely option is that they still remain all in on PC. I don't think they're going to win a direct fight with Meta like that. Not that they couldn't if they really, really wanted to compete well. I think it'd just be very challenging, and it would require them to be a very different company than they really are. I think the most likely option is that this headset is about taking the experience that you have with a Quest 3 and Steam Link today and designing a headset entirely around it. And as you say, Ian, not having the extras that you need to do all the standalone stuff. So maybe it is a less powerful chipset that doesn't require such a heavy cooling assembly, and you can have a smaller battery and things like that. It's more designed for remote rendering. One of the things that I meant to bring up in the intro but didn't is that another thing that is leaked repeatedly over and over again is this idea of a SteamVR Link dongle.
the idea that instead of having to rely on your Wi-Fi network for wireless PC VR, you would get almost certainly in the box, in my opinion, the dongle that you plug into your PC. And I understand a lot of people in our enthusiast audience are saying, no, I want to plug a DisplayPort cable and have it go directly pixel for pixel into my headset. And I'm sure there's no reason they wouldn't support that too. But what we've learned from the market over the past couple of years is that the majority of people want to play wireless. It's quite clear that that is the case. And so I think Valve would be very clever to primarily focus on that and market it and keep it in the box. So, I mean, I think we could see a headset that is very strongly focused on just saying, how do you get the best quality, lowest friction, overall best user experience, wireless PC VR experience, right? Index was focused on how do you get the best quality, best experience for wired PC VR, but that wire was one of the biggest problems of Index. Of course, if you're an enthusiast, you don't care, but we're talking about earlier, how do you get, the next 3 million people to jump into PC VR? And I don't think it is with a tethered headset. It is with being able to plug a dongle in to any kind of PC, put on a headset, and instantaneously be in SteamVR.
Kaylee, I love that comment from Kaylee out here, speaking directly to my heart here. I just want to know what it is already so I can pull the trigger on it or just get a Play for Dream or Beyond 2. I actually I put in an order for a Beyond 2. I don't have the money for it, but I wanted to get in line and throw my money down and see what it's like to be a customer of big screen directly and see whether I get delayed. I think the shipping was slated for November. That's where I got in line. We'll see. I know our audience out there is itching for our impressions on that, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. They can send one to David as well at any time when they're ready for us to do a proper review. But Big Screen Beyond looks like a really, really interesting device, but my heart goes out to those people that they want to make a decision. They're ready to spend money and they're itching. Like, am I going to miss this year? Is it next year really when I'm going to do an upgrade here?
Yeah, there always has been, since very shortly after the Index launch, this big looming question of, do I jump in now or do I wait for what Valve is doing next? And you could argue both ways. You could say that if you had this same discussion with yourself 2 years ago, you would have missed out on 2 great years of having a Quest 3 by worrying about it. And maybe Valve isn't going to launch until late 2026, and there's now a year from now until you actually get a headset, or maybe they're going to launch tomorrow. It's impossible to know. That is the difficulty, and my heart also goes out to people who are trying to make that very, very difficult decision. We always say with every one of these leaks and jumps and, Valve is getting closer than ever, but that's almost tautological, right? Because of course they're getting closer than ever. Time has progressed. Every second is a closer time than ever. But is trademarking a product name close enough that you're going to hold your money back on buying a Big Screen Beyond 2 until you know what Valve is cooking? Who knows? It's a really tough decision.
So I want to go back on one comment here. It was I think after all this time, it might be a letdown, and it's a really interesting thought. Meta has spent an extraordinary amount of money to ship these generations of standalone headset. Ultimately speaking, if you start counting it up, how many generations of standalone have they shipped? If we count each headset as its own generation, it'd be like 7 or 8 generations of standalone, maybe.
I wouldn't count each. I would say they've done 3, right? But It depends how you count it, right?
Yeah. All right. So, but depending on how you count it, but that's a lot of learning annually to ship a standalone device you wear on your face and get you VR experiences. And Valve has an extraordinary amount of experience as the creator of Steam, and all the transactions that they keep going through Steam every day is extraordinary. But that is not the same technical problem as a standalone VR headset you wear on your face. Like,
well, yeah, but what if it's not about being standalone? What if it's just about being wireless? We often
conflate wireless and standalone. And yeah, technically any wireless headset kind of is the same thing as a standalone headset, right? You need to do the decoding and kind of the, reprojection on board. But I think a way for a smaller company to compete with a bigger company is always focus. Instead of trying to be the jack of all trades, you go really hard and lean into your strength. And Valve's strength is PC. It is the PC. The PC is an afterthought for Meta. Questlink is something that is there kind of by accident so the developers can build Quest apps. People every week in our comments are telling us that Questlink is broken. They don't have DisplayPort in on their Quest, right? They can't do direct wired even if they want to. They don't have the dongle that Meta partnered with D-Link for was Wi-Fi 5, I think, which is crazy in the era of Wi-Fi 6E and 7. There is an opportunity for Valve to come and make a headset that is designed from the ground up for PC VR and not bogged down by all the design constraints that you have to spend billions on to ship standalone.
I'm going to slightly disagree. I think we mostly are on the same place there, but I'm going to argue that Valve's strength is in VR, not in mixed reality, not in augmented reality. Yes, it's PC VR, but it's the focus of being only virtual reality and not lopping on mixed reality or interactive environment. Geometry. You don't need great cameras to do great geometry breakdowns and all those things. I'm saying that, like, your point about whether it's standalone or whether it's PC is kind of moot as long as it's focused on just being a great VR headset.
Sure, but Quest 3, when it's in VR only mode, right? When you're playing Batman Arkham Shadow, the colored cameras aren't being used for anything. They're what, $20 or $30 of cost, maybe at most. I don't think you dramatically change a headset to add mixed reality. It's a couple of extra cameras. When they're being processed, it is, of course. When you're doing pass-through, absolutely. But I don't think there's actually that huge of a difference. At the end of the day, it's a VR headset with some color cameras on it that and you're using them sometimes and not. And by having the other cameras, the tracking cameras, the ones that you don't see, you can do all those kind of things. But you need them anyway for positional tracking, controller tracking, and things like that. And if you look at the design of those ROI controllers, it looks pretty clear to me that these things are going to be tracked by cameras on the headset. I don't see any other way you would track them, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, no, but where I'm going with this is, imagine you just, Valve's trying to come up with something competitive to the Quest, right? And they're trying to come up with.
I don't know if they are.
Okay, all I'm saying is you're trying to kind of find a price. You're trying to ship this at a certain price, and you've got a decision: do I put in great cameras, or do I put my money into some other component and actually favor that instead? And
sure.
I mean, there are little trade-offs that can affect that.
Sure, but the cameras aren't that expensive. It's not dramatically changing the product. It's not like putting in micro OLED displays or something crazy like that. The way you would design a headset to be designed entirely around VR and tacking on a little bit of mixed reality isn't fundamentally that different.
But I mean, yeah, I guess
they're 4 megapixel cameras on the Quest 3 and 3S.
No, I know. I always feel like we're playing we're always playing devil's advocate on whether it makes sense to include the $30 component or whether that is the critical component to remove in order to get a slightly lower price to slip in under the competition or provide some other difference. And I think that's where I'm going with that. It's just what I feel like this moment needs is a focused standalone product that does VR well in standalone without Meta APIs whatsoever, and then connects to your PC, hopefully with great wireless. That was the component I was trying to gather on. If I could sacrifice a few dollars on the cameras in order to put it into a better wireless system inside the headset, I would do that as the hardware manufacturer, because your point is this thing needs to be a beast when it connects to my PC over there in the corner.
Yeah, I think another question that hasn't really been answered, we've seen some leaks suggesting 1,200, but at this point, I don't believe any leak that has a claim of a price this early. I don't know. I think if they are competing with Quest price, they're trying to do a $300, $400, $500 product, then sure, yeah, considerations like that, every penny does count at that point. But if the 1,200 rumor is true, it doesn't matter, right? At that point, the BOM cost is so insignificant at that point, they might as well include it. But it could be, I take your point that it could be that then you just don't have a chipset that's designed to process this, right? Maybe they just use a chipset that is solely designed for taking in a wireless VR stream. I think I kind of agree with you, but in a different angle. I think that maybe by actually designing it for just PC VR, not standalone, you do that same thing. You shave off weight and cost and allow yourself to build something else. We haven't actually seen anyone build what I'm describing. You could have a chipset, still a chipset on board and still a battery, but a lot less powerful than the one you have in a Quest, and therefore produces less heat, uses less energy, and therefore you have a lighter cooling assembly, maybe not even a fan, maybe you don't actually need a fan. You have a smaller battery. All of these things can be done if you're designing that chipset to do one thing, and that's just decode a wireless stream and do some basic controller tracking, and then you don't need to do those. So I think we could be right, but from different angles. I think we're getting at the same thing, that they're going to design around a specific thing. It's just we don't know what that specific experience they're designing around is.
Yeah, I think we're nailing it. And where I'm going with my sort of pitch here, or where I'm suggesting things, is what the moment needs, right? Meta is trying to be a mixed reality platform that spans the entire gamut from AR to VR. And one of the criticisms that I can make right now about wearing a Quest is that if my family member walks up to me right now and addresses me, the Quest will not devote any computer vision, any hardware, any clock cycles of any kind, whatever, to identifying that person, popping them into my environment, and showing me them in VR. Where Apple Vision Pro is devoting some amount of its processing power all the time that you're running it to watching out there and seeing if people come into your room and invade your virtual reality experience. Meta is actually like re-architecting its entire operating system in real time in front of us, version 81, 82, each new version, to try to get ready for this world that Apple is already shipping, where it can reach out and see the people walking into me. And all I'm saying is, if you actually do a head fake where, actually, I'm in VR, I'm fine just taking the headset off to look at the person who's coming to me to address me. I don't actually need to do the full spatial computing ecosystem that Apple is pitching. And, it's at the same moment that Meta is trying to be this everything operating system, Valve could come in and say, we got VR, we're good.
Yeah, it is. It's an interesting idea. I think, as some of the commenters are saying, I imagine Quest 4 definitely will do that. And there's almost a slight contradiction in what you're saying, where you're saying, I find this Apple Vision Pro feature really valuable and it's great. And then kind of saying, well, Valve could just get rid of it. But I think, if you go all in,
it's not worth $3,000, and we both know it, right?
Sorry, say that again.
That feature is not worth $3,000, and we all know it.
But the next Qualcomm chipset will do it at 300 to 500 in a Quest. That's what I'm saying. So if you kind of just follow the path of getting better and better NPUs and doing this more and more computer vision, I would be shocked if Quest 4 or whatever the hell they call the next headset doesn't do that. It seems so obvious and essential. And coming back to the pass-through thing, even if you don't like mixed reality, I think the pass-through has a value, which is why maybe it's worth it to design a kind of race car that doesn't have this. In the same way, the analogy is literal. You take stuff out of a race car, right, to make it lighter and better. But it actually is useful to not have to take the headset off. It is useful to be able to double tap the side of my Quest 3 or press the action button on my Quest 3S and instantly pause VR and see a color pass-through view of the world. And so maybe it doesn't detect the person coming into the room, but I can just hear them and double tap the headset and go and talk to them and then go back in. And one of the things that you see, one of the things I love to do is read reviews on kind of normie retailers of headsets, whether it be Pico or Quest or PlayStation VR. I go to Best Buy, I go to Curry's, I go to Amazon, I click the reviews and I read them and I see what do normal people think of these products. And one of the things you see on the Quest 3S and 3 is people saying, I love the fact that I can see the real world without having to take the headset off, even for just VR, just to be able to pause it as a kind of pass-through pause feature. So I think it's valuable on its own. But I take your point that if you get rid of all that, if you design a product that doesn't need that, maybe you have advantages there. There are no free lunches, and trade-offs have advantages.
Yeah. Wonderful discussion here, and I think we got into most of it. Is there any other comments out there you want to respond to? I saw we've got Ober becoming a member near the end of the show, so thank you for becoming a member to support our work. And yeah, hit the like button, become a member, share these links out to other people so that they can understand their basic questions. As I think we've got a good track record here of being inviting to new VR users who have basic questions. So we want to. If you have trouble explaining to your friend why VR is the next phase of personal computing, we want this stream to be a great place for your friends to come to figure that out with us. Anything you want to talk about here before we close out?
I think Obermuckle either just became a member or is a member that just joined. The YouTube UI doesn't make that crystal clear, but thank you anyway, regardless of that. James O'Loughlin pointing out that Valve Index has color pass-through, so that would be a regression, but we could see Valve regressing and focusing. Valve Index is a $1,000 tethered product. It's not, the be-all and end-all. Meta reverted in some ways, right? Quest 1 to Quest 2, you lost precise IPD adjustment and OLED. That's something that could be possible here in a product. I'm seeing a lot of people give their take on this kind of pass-through discussion. Very interesting takes all around there. And yeah, I think, again, the last thing I want to point out is when it comes to this 2D use case we're talking about, playing your flat screen Steam games on a giant screen, maybe we should talk a tiny bit more about that, because I think automatically pairing with your nearby Steam Deck would make so much sense, right? Your Steam Deck, without having to plug in anything or press anything, you just look at it and it becomes a controller. The display turns off. It's exactly the same thing that happens with Mac Virtual Display on Apple. You look at your Steam Deck, the screen turns off, it pops up into a giant screen in front of it, it becomes a controller, you play all your games on a giant screen. It seems so natural. The big question that I think a lot of people ask, and I really hope, is, can they then do some sort of system level 3D injection so that I'm now playing my Steam games in 3D, or do they make it an SDK that's part of Steam? That's a big question. Do we get our flat screen games but in 2D? What do you call a flat screen game in 2D? Big questions. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here. I think we've had a great discussion today. I think both of us cannot wait to see what Valve does, and we will bring you news as soon as we have it.
There's one good comment here, just a last question that popped in right here before the end. Any comments on third-party Horizon OS hardware? That is, I can't remember the question I said would be first out of David's mouth when he goes to Meta, but that one is going to compete for it. I would say if we don't see updates or substantial updates on third-party Horizon OS hardware at MetaConnect, we're going to be wondering whether there's fire there, like what is happening, where is the updates here? They should have provided one by now, I think.
Yeah, I'm torn on this. On the one hand, people talk about it as if it's been years. It actually hasn't been. It's only been about a year and a half. Hardware takes a long time to build. I think that these announcements that were 16 months ago or whatever, that was the announcement of the partnership. To build the headset then takes years. So I actually wouldn't be surprised if we see these headsets arrive in 2026, for example. The hardware is not that quick to just go from idea to shipping. Should they tease it? Yeah, they should. At this point, there's enough, whatever I think about hardware development timelines, there's enough skepticism and enough kind of despair, I've used that word multiple times in this show for some reason, in the community about this, that they should give an update. They should give a tease. They should show a silhouette or something, have Asus come on stage at Connect and go and literally show a little silhouette and go, it's coming. That's all they need to do, I think, to keep the faith on this.
I mean, that's a good idea, but I don't. Is also, what does that do to Quest 3 and 3S sales if they have to push through one more Christmas here? Like, how bad would that make their quarterly earnings if they come out and said, right around the corner is a much better one?
The Osborne effect, yeah. But again, we would then know that this is maybe going to be twice the price of Quest 3 or something like that. But yeah, that's a really good point. How do you this is the balance they have to give. How do you tease a
future product without reducing sales of the current one? Do you do a price? Do you put a silhouette and $9.99 coming soon? Then is that an announcement at that point? You might as well just announce the product. That's a tough one.
No commitments, but should I be in this studio during Connect, or should I? Because I can operate, I can do virtual desktop, but like you're going to be on scene, and
yeah, we'll figure that out. We'll figure that out. Yeah.
All right, we'll see. We've got a little bit of time here until Connect. Hit the like button on this show. Share us out. We'll be back as often as we can. Can't remember when David travels, but we will be around David's travel schedule. And please get us business class. David refuses it. Well, I will put it. I will pay. We will pay for freelancers to write articles for UploadVR.com, and I will tell them that they're taking David's business class.
Please don't do that.
Okay, I'm sorry. I won't do that.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
We'll see you next week. See you in the future.